Welcome to Soul Sessions with Emma. This is a space where I share stories of people who've chosen to live honestly, take risks, and start again. Today, I'm joined by someone who brings a truly unique perspective to women's health and life transitions. My guest is Michelle Hardwick, with over 25 years' experience in the health field. What I love about Michelle's work is that she doesn't believe in a one-size-fits-all solution. Instead, she creates bespoke, tailored approaches for every individual, blending evidence-based techniques with intuitive understanding to get to the root of challenges that traditional methods often miss. Michelle has worked all over the world, beginning her career in the hospitality industry before moving into hypnotherapy, NLP, and now developing programs that help people navigate menopause and major life changes with confidence and clarity. Her latest project is something I find really exciting, a guide called Menopause Wingman. It's designed for partners supporting women through menopause, and it's based on real conversations and insights from men about what this journey is like for them. Today, we'll be talking about Michelle's personal journey, her unique approach to health and healing, and what she's learning from men about menopause, and some practical tips for anyone going through this stage of life or supporting someone who is. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with me today, Michelle.
Thank
It's
you
been a
so
long
much,
time
Emma. It has. And I'm so grateful for the invite. I really am. And delighted to be here and to speak with your audience too. You know, it's a real gift. So thank you, Emma, too. Yeah.
Yeah. So as always, I love to start off with, your earliest life and how you got to where you are now, sort of the beginning of the journey for you. If you wouldn't mind sharing that first.
Sure. So, well, I began in the hospitality industry. My parents had fish and chip shops. And so I was the last in the queue, as it were. There was the whole line of us, my father fish frying and my mother doing the portioning, my sister doing the salt and vinegar, my brother wrapping the paper and then in white paper. And then I would be at the end by the till with my hand out for money. So that was kind of the beginning. So I was really always in the service industry and really looking to help people. And of course, my parents were delighted to please people with the food that they cooked. My father was a cook in the army. So for him, doing big portions was never an issue, So I went through technical college and I finished off doing hospitality and catering, a higher national diploma as it was back then in the 80s. And I was asked if I would go over to Switzerland to help my aunt who'd had a stroke. So that was really my first risk, was to leave everything. Now my mother is Swiss, so we have been there on holiday occasionally, as kids. So that was my first risk, really, was to say, yes, I'd do it. And I was only intending to be there 6 months, but it ended up morphing into 8 years. And I loved it there. I loved the people, loved food, of course. I'm a real foodie. And so it ended up then that I was in the French, I was initially in Zurich and then in the French speaking part. And then I was teaching and I really felt like I was missing out on some Asian experience. And a colleague said, well, we have people here from the large chains coming to interview our students for internships. Why not have a chat with them? And I said, yep. Okay. And I was offered a position in Beijing. So in the very early 90s, I hopped on a plane to Beijing, met by this enormous black limousine, and I'm driving down with people walking and, donkeys and you name it. It was a bit mind-blowing. And I loved Beijing at that time. It was just so different and so exciting, never stopped. And I met some amazing people there. And so I kind of then worked for 3 years in Beijing, and it was coming to a time when we were trying to train the Chinese managers to take over. So I saw that my role was sort of really being disbanded, and I opened up a newspaper and there was a job for New Zealand. So I said, that's got my name all over it. So I applied, had a telephone interview, and I got the job in Dunedin. And so at Christmas in the late 90s, I think it was, I went over to Dunedin and stayed with my boss then, and started the job again teaching. And then I moved into more consulting and working with industry and in the industry. And although it was enjoyable, I still felt I was missing something, and I felt like I was sort of in a service industry, but it wasn't really doing anything for me anymore. And so again, I looked in a newspaper and I saw an advert for hypnosis, and I thought, yeah, I think that's me. Now, to backtrack, when I was doing my O levels, I was listening to information on cassette tapes. This is how far back we're going now, very retro. But I was listening to information, on cassette tapes. So all the symbols for chemistry, past, present, and future for French and German, all of the things I needed to learn, I would put on a cassette tape and play it through the night. And so I was getting this information while I was sleeping. And so I knew that this was really helpful, but I never thought it was actually going to ever be a career for me. And then I saw this and I thought, oh, maybe I could do it. Maybe that would be something for me. And if I backtrack even further, and this is the power of advertising and TV, when I was a small child, my favorite movie and soundtrack was actually Dumbo. And I watched it when I was 40, and I could not believe that the mouse lifts up Dumbo's ears while he's sleeping, and he's programming Dumbo in his sleep. So I was like, and I only saw that when I was already, a good number of years in the industry, but it stayed with me. And so I used it for my O levels. And then I thought, well, yes, it's time for me to do something different. And I have to say, I studied 2 years and I was terrified of going out and being self-employed, terrified of, what happens if I, make a mistake with people and do some damage. I don't have that regular income coming in. And my ex-husband at the time said, well, there is a room in the community centre, you could do it. And I was having a meltdown, like, no, I can't do it, full of self-doubt. So we negotiated, and I sort of was a part caretaker, but also I was able to use this particular room, and we decorated it and set it up. And then I straddled. So I did 3 days of consulting initially, and 2 days then on my work that I really loved. And I just got such a buzz from studying. And it was even more powerful actually helping clients. And I think that's where it just felt like I was really listening to my heart and doing what my heart was telling me to do. And so that's when I started working, and I was on the radio, I was on TV, and I was a guest speaker, talking about hypnosis and the power of hypnosis, and was loving it. And took a few risks as well. Like I wanted to train over in America, and there was no place for me. And I hopped on the plane and just said, I'm going anyway. I really need to be there. And there was a spot for me. So it's kind of from that really that, other things came in. I started working with NLP, which was mind-blowing as well for me. And then the tapping EFT, I added that too, and then went to America to train with the founder of EFT. And we were with him for a week, and that was utterly life-changing. We just tapped every day from kind of 9 to 5. And then I started really going down a more strong, my clinic was called the Mind, Body and Spirit Clinic. And so I was working with the mind. I was also using practices on the body. And I felt that, I needed more of a spiritual practice to be included in the work I was doing. And again, I saw an ad, and it was about joining a mystery school in New Zealand, up in the North Island. And I don't know how, but I saw on one of the website pages, because there were numerous ones, that there was a sponsorship available. And this was a 2-year program. It was quite expensive. And so I just thought, I'll just give it a shot. And I was crying when I wrote the letter because I was so embarrassed that I couldn't afford to pay for it at that point. But I wrote it and I just said, look, if I could be considered for the sponsorship, I would be incredibly grateful. Anyway, they came back and said no. So I said, okay, fair enough. Not meant to be at this point. Maybe I'll just pop it on the credit card. How a flexible friend, and see how I go, And then about 2 weeks before we were due to start, I got an email to say someone had dropped out, and did I want the sponsorship? I cried. I was just crying. And then I jumped up from the computer and I was dancing around the front room. And my ex-husband was like, what's going on? And I was like, I got a place and it's sponsored. So we had to pay a third rather than the full fee.
Yeah.
And so I was incredibly grateful. I went up and there was about 60 people on the course, and we were meditating every day. We were creating sacred codes. We were working with the land up in New Zealand. It was just amazing. And I'm still in touch with about 4 or 5 of the women that we really got on together, with so deeply. So that kind of took me in a different direction, where I was looking at meditation and bringing in then more of a spiritual practice. I was then a record keeper, so I'd be looking at the Akashic records and, looking into what was going on for the person. And even now when I do past life regressions, I get a feeling or a sense that this is within the lineage, a person's lineage. It goes back further, or it could be within their past lives. And then depending on how open they are to that, I might just work with where we are today, and then we might look at going further back. So that was amazing, really. And then my marriage I was on the spiritual path and my husband wasn't. But I knew in my heart I had to keep going on the spiritual path. And so it was kind of like I'd go on that path and then I'd come back, and then I'd go and then I'd come back. And then the gap just kept getting wider and wider. And I just felt I have to follow this. This is my heart speaking to me. And so, and there was some other things that happened personally that I couldn't handle. There was a lot of stuff going on in the family itself. And so I just said, you know what, I just can't handle this with everything else. So I left.
Wow. So, Michelle, there is so much in that. That's amazing. It just seems like you had such a journey. Do you mind if I rewind back to that first stepping stone into hypnotherapy? Because I find that really fascinating. And
Sure.
thinking back to the 90s, my memory of hypnotherapy is Paul McKenna.
Indeed.
He was a huge figure I remember on TV when I was younger. And
Yes.
for most of us, we hear of hypnotherapy and we do think of the tape recorder and, listening.
Yes.
How does it actually work? So it must tap into the brain somehow and then patterns. How would you explain that to the ordinary everyday person?
Well, it's about, you are tapping into, so you're tapping into the deeper mind. You're tapping into the subconscious or the unconscious. And that's there all the time. It's not separate. But what you're doing is you're narrowing down your focus. So you're slowing your heart rate down. You're slowing your breathing down. And you're dropping into that state that we know of as hypnosis. But actually, we're doing it every day. So when you go to sleep, you have to go through the state of hypnosis to get to deep sleep. And when you come back up, when you wake up and you're not fully awake, you're not wide awake, but you're just kind of in that in-betweeny kind of phase. That's the state of hypnosis. So you are aware, you're not knocked out, you're not unconscious, where you don't hear anything. But in that state, your mind is really open. And it's open to positive suggestions. It's open to kind of discovering more about yourself and taking you back to the root of where the particular condition or the challenge or the project, whichever label you want to give it, where that is. And often people have a concept of, well, it began with this. And it could be that that was maybe the first time there's a recognition of it. But actually, there may be something much deeper that's buried more deeply in the psyche. And that's what we're looking to tap into. And I think Paul McKenna did an incredible job in bringing that on the world stage. And he's still doing it today. But I think what I was trying to do as well was to make it more of a therapy. So in New Zealand, I was talking about it not as I'm certain that's not my characteristic, is to be on a stage, having people clucking like chickens or whatever. That's really not my thing. And so there is that, and that is entertainment. And if you want to go to that, then people want to be entertained. So that's kind of a different style, and it takes a really confident person to be able to stand in front of a group of people and do that. I prefer to work much more intimately, where people are sharing perhaps things that they've never talked about in their lives before to anybody else. So I feel really privileged to just be one-on-one. I have done group, because I used to, pre-COVID, I was doing a lot of retreats, and we would do kind of group sessions as well. And that was really powerful. That was connected with meditation and mindfulness as well. But I find that much more so powerful. So I would be getting the person nice and comfortable, making sure they're warm, and then allowing them to slow their breathing down and sort of accessing that state. And everybody can do it, because most people do go to sleep, and then come back up out of it. But it's sort of similar, do you drive at all? Do you drive, Emma?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's kind of when you're driving down a stretch of road that you know really well, and then you get to a point you go, oh my God, I've driven through such and such. I didn't even realize. That's hypnosis. So you're still in command of the vehicle, but you're just kind of gone off somewhere in your mind. And then if someone were to walk in front of you, you'd be right there again, and that's the same in hypnosis. So I think that's really it. Part of it was sort of education to say, yes, there are stage shows, but there's also therapeutic work that can be done, deep, potent therapeutic work, where you're accessing, and you might access it through a sensation. It could be through a memory. It could be through a pattern that is familiar. So we're just looking and delving into whatever feels appropriate to come up. And some people are like, oh my God, I don't want to share my secrets, or there's so many of them, what's going to happen? But actually, your mind has the ability to be able to actually say, yeah, today this is relevant and this is what you need to work with today, and maybe leave some of the deeper stuff for later. Sometimes it goes, yes, this is a fantastic opportunity, let's go for it. And then everything kind of unwinds then, and you see, it's almost like a helicopter vision that you're seeing, that connects to that, and that connects to that. Oh my God. And that and that's what's going on in my life today. But it all links back, like pearls on a string. It's like it all links back to that one event and a decision that you've made internally, like, I'm not being noticed, therefore that means I'm not lovable, or I'm not good enough, or I have to work harder, smarter, whatever, in order to be loved or to be acknowledged or to be seen or to be worthy of whatever it is. So often we go back to that first pearl, if you like, and then look at the decisions that were made there. And maybe one of the things, and each client gets a choice about that, is they then decide, is that really relevant today? And often it isn't, because you're making it with, say, a 2-year-old brain or a 3-year-old brain or a 5-year-old brain, which was great when you're 5, but not when you're 35 or 45 or 55. And then we can recreate a different way of being, a different decision, to feel like, oh, my mother was distracted. That has nothing to do with me. Oh, my mother couldn't regulate herself and was really struggling with stress or whatever. That has nothing to do with me, and it's not my fault. So that's really part of it, is that discovering or uncovering, and then this sort of reprogramming reprogramming per se this old belief into a new belief, into a new habit, a new condition, a new behavior, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. I remember seeing a program
Hmm.
a few years ago, which was quite heartbreaking. It was, I think there was a case in America in the 90s where a group of women had hypnotherapy where they then remembered their perpetrator as children, and they
Wow.
had given evidence against that. And
Yeah.
people were not believing it because they said, well, that's hypnotherapy. They don't remember it happening to them. It was only through hypnotherapy it came out. So I remember that the trauma that they had buried
Mm,
because of, obviously the event at the time.
mm,
So yeah, we probably do know hypnotherapy most in Ireland anyway, I know, and England through Paul McKenna, but
mm,
it's become much more widely used. And then NLP and other practices, that's a lot, again, that's becoming a lot more well known. But I presume in the 90s there was a bit of speculation around that, or what sort of clients were you getting at that time? What sort of challenges would they have had?
So when I opened the clinic, that would have been in the year 2000. So I was doing my training in the 90s. So there was a lot of skepticism. There was a lot of fear. And so some clients were looking to, stop smoking or, lose weight. And I found, though, that I attracted people who, for want of a better word, had tried everything else and were desperate, and knew that there was something else, but they couldn't sort it out through medication, and they tried so many other things and nothing seemed to work. So I was sort of the last person really that people would call for certain things. And, I remember working with a lady who was in, I can't even remember whether it was she was 80, late 80s or something around that time. And she'd had IBS all that time. And, she was really struggling and medication hadn't helped. And so she was becoming more and more enclosed at home because she's terrified of going out and having an accident, and then not being able to get to a bathroom quickly. Go out, she had all the bathrooms mapped so she knew where she could go, in an event of an emergency. So imagine how limiting that is for somebody. It's an awful, awful thing. And so, yeah, we tracked back, and the condition, the feelings and the sensations went back to a trauma when she was, I think it was 15 or 16. And so it was, we worked with it. It was safe because it came up. The subconscious kind of only reveals what it's safe to reveal at that particular time. And so it came up and we worked with it. And I also did some EFT, the tapping with it to help her. And then we did some reprogramming of the mind so that her bowel could hold on. So we were I was doing hold on, stay tight, hold on, hold on. And so that was a mantra that she would use herself if she was in a situation. And then over time, we unpeeled, if you like, the various layers of emotions. So there was always fear about going out. So we had to work with that. And then fear about having an accident. And then there was also the trauma of what happened in her youth, which had such because the stomach is the seat of all emotions. That's where we hold everything. And so she'd held that trauma in there. And then whenever there was anything similar to that, similar feeling, similar emotion, the bowel would just let go. It's like, I can't hold this fear. It's too much. I just got to let it go. Got to let it go.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And as you obviously are seeing yourself, the mind and the body are so closely connected. I was reading Gabor Mate's work, The Body Says No, and there's
Yes.
so many fascinating stories about people who've had these illnesses for a very long time.
Yes.
And then you look at their past and their family history and how they show up in their family and so on,
Yeah.
and realizing, like with your client experience, it's usually linked with a feeling in the past.
Yeah, I think so. There are environmental factors for sure, and there are also emotional factors that need to be supported or helped. I think Gabor Mate is doing an incredible job of the work he's doing, in that compassionate inquiry. Um, and I think that's really the way to go. I think in the 90s there were options, but they were limited options in terms of getting support and help for people. There's so much more choice now, and I think, like my father, when I started my own business, he was like, when are you going to get a proper job? Now there's much more acceptance of you working in the health field and working with clients. And particularly when COVID hit, like here in Ireland, there was sort of a lull for those first 3 months where people were like, well, we'll be back on track, so we won't do anything. And then as it became more apparent that actually we're not going back to normal, people then, a lot of the trauma that had been suppressed in people was activated. And particularly also in menopause, that happens, that unprocessed stuff from the past comes up. So then, I was offering my sessions online. And I was already doing that with overseas clients. I was doing a lot of traveling anyway. So clients would connect with me and say, I'd like to continue doing some work, which was wonderful. But then a lot more people in Ireland started to realize I'm not going to be able to see anybody. Some therapists were doing in-person sessions, but for me, it felt easier and safer to just do it online. So much more of my work now is done online. So, I mean, that's been an incredible shift as well, where people feel comfortable, then they don't have to negotiate traffic or travel. Like I used to have people traveling from Belgium or from France or from Germany to come and do the work with me. So now they don't. They can stay at home. They're saving money, they're saving time and effort and stress. And then they can actually be comfortable at home, do the work, which is very similar. It's the same.
Yeah.
You're just working with the screen rather than the person in the office. But we've really kind of transitioned into something, more profound. I think it's going to keep going. I don't think it's going to stop. All those options are available, and I think there's more to come. Yeah.
Michelle, of course, you're originally from Wales, but you're
Yeah,
now living in
I
Ireland.
am.
It's really fascinating the point that you made about COVID, because it's true. People have to finally pause and actually think about where they were in life and were they happy? Is
Yeah,
this where they will be? And
yeah,
unfortunately, it ended up with some people changing, their mind about the relationship they're in, and might have had some
very true.
consequences, but also perhaps
Yeah,
finding the path they should be on. But as you said there, the fact that you
yes,
have online, you have more people probably accessing therapy than ever before, because I know
yes.
personally in Ireland, people would have been very much about, I don't want anyone to see me going to this therapist. It's
Very true.
embarrassing. Whereas
Yes,
now, if you can do this in the safety of your own
home.
home, hopefully there are more and more people accessing and thinking more about, what they have to heal
Yeah,
going forward as
yeah,
well. So what
yeah.
type of clients do
Yeah.
you get now, Michelle? So moving from, obviously you're about hypnotherapy, now what you
Yes.
do. Um,
Mainly, so a lot more women going through menopause. Um, I still get younger women who are looking to make a change in their life, who are aware that there are some sort of blocks, if you like, or limitations that are preventing them from moving forward, either personally or in their business. I also work with men as well, who are struggling also with what's going on with their partners and the emotional burden of that. And that's really where I felt that there was a gap, and that again was something per chance, and I know there's nothing by chance, it's all
yeah,
synchronistic. um,
yeah,
so I was on a speed networking event, and I was talking about the work I was doing with women through the menopause and helping their partners understand and kind of cope with the roller coaster really of emotions that come in for women, and also the change that happens in the relationship. And he said to me, you should write a book for men. And I said, yeah. And he said, if only I had had this information earlier, it could have saved my marriage. And I just thought, wow. And now there's more women talking about it. There's much more of a platform for women to find out what's going on. I mean, slowly they're starting to get HRT. There is much more visibility. But actually, I was thinking there isn't that much for men. There's nothing really. There are a few maybe support groups, but nothing really of significance, or and so I was thinking, actually, yeah, maybe that's, and as soon as I started and I was thinking, right, think about the chapters, think about what I was doing, and it sort of started to more, and it had an energy of its own. And I got people saying, yeah, I'm helping, I can do this. And then there was all sorts of things which are still kind of unfolding. And the one person who was on the call as well was a woman who runs a publishing company. And so she looked at me and I looked at her when he was saying this, and we were like, perfect. My business called Release Peace, and her publishing company is Inner Peace Press. And I was like, well, there you go. You know what I mean? Here we are. Let's go for it. So we've started to collaborate, and she's going to be publishing the book. Her company will be publishing the book. So it's kind of a mix. To come back to your question about the clients, it's kind of a mix really of people who are struggling with the emotions and what's actually going on through the menopause. There's also what happens in menopause is a lot of unresolved stuff can also come up to the surface because our resistance is less. We are becoming much more aligned with ourselves. So your bullshit radar is really turned up to the max. You're not kind of, what's the word? You're not even frightened to actually speak your truth anymore. So, you're coming into this kind of crone phase, or the wise woman phase. And so, that lovely estrogen kind of where you're people pleasing and all that kind of stuff, that drops away as the hormone levels drop. So therefore you're in this, I don't give a shit, and say it, and, it's your problem to deal with kind of thing, So there's kind of a fallout as well. And of course, there's a shift in the relationship because men have been used to the women who have been malleable and pleasing and, and now suddenly here's this other woman who's coming out now, not suppressing her emotions. That anger does come up. So there's a whole load of emotions that come up, and some of it is about the current situation, about their bodies, about what's going on, and it isn't an easy journey, to say the least. But then it just felt like we need to include the men in this journey now. It's not women's stuff. This is about relationships. This is about families. This is about people understanding so much more than ever before. We can't just whisper this because, if I think about my own life, my mother never talked about menopause. She'd just go, is it hot in here or is it me? Yes, it's you, Mum. It's not hot in here at all. Bless her. Steam coming off and sweat pouring off her. My sister didn't say anything other than have a rest in the afternoons if you can, and never go to bed on an empty stomach. And that was it. That was all my education on the menopause. And I remember because I was teaching and traveling in Asia 6 months of the year, and then I'd be home 6 months and I'd be gone 6 months. And I was in Hong Kong and I went to get a herbal formula because I was having trouble sleeping. Jet lag was really bad. I was feeling really off, and I was like, I really need to get some herbs. And so he took my pulse, he checked my tongue, and he went, no, no, no. And I would have been in my 40s, maybe 41, 42. So he said to me, no, 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 you're far too young to be in the menopause. I was like, well, that's for old women. No, I'm not in the menopause. And he's like, you're in the menopause. And I'm like, no. And he goes, yeah, you're far too young. I will give you herbs. It'll set you back on track. You'll start bleeding again. And off we go. And that's exactly what happened. And I did not realize when I was in my 20s taking the contraceptive pill, it would actually bring my menopause on sooner. So what my mother started at 50 and my sister started at 50, I was already starting in my early 40s. And I did not know that. And I could have taken Agnus Castus, I could have taken a lot of other things to help my body. to smooth into, rather than, having such a tricky journey. And of course, then when I realized that was the case, I then decided, right, I'm not going the medical route. I'm not doing anything synthetic or chemical. I have to do this naturally. And so I think that was very difficult as well, because it would work for a certain month or a couple of months, and then I'd be like, oh yeah, that's fantastic, I've nailed it now, and then the hormone levels would drop again, and then I'd have to start researching again, and then off we go again, and then I'd find something else, and then it'd be like, oh thank God I have it now, and then again it would change, you know what I mean? So it was like, oh what a nightmare. And so that's really part of the journey, is not having the command of your body anymore, and the things that you used to use and the things that you used to do don't work anymore. And so it was kind of finding this and saying, look, I can't go back into chemicals, I can't do the synthetic stuff, because I don't know personally 20 years from now what's going to happen. And I'm very aware my mother and my father have dementia and Alzheimer's. So that's a precursor, especially if you don't manage the menopause correctly. So I also have been researching that and looking to what I need to eat, and then other supplements that I need to take now in my 60s in preparation for that, so that I'm already ticking those boxes now. Because if I had have known, I might have done something sooner. I don't know, I was in my 20s and I thought I was bulletproof, you know what I mean? So if someone would have said something, would I have listened? I'm not sure. But I certainly now, have realized that, we do need to take much more care of ourselves. So yeah, so I know that was a long answer to your question, Emma. Sorry. I went off.
It's fascinating, honestly. And the takeaways I got from that are, I presume there's some of this is going to be in your book, about the facts we at least didn't know before about the pill and what that does to the body.
Yeah,
Of course, more and more things are being revealed nowadays.
correct.
Even when I was younger, everyone was encouraged to take the pill. It was
Yes.
no certain, even though it's a stream of side effects, and you open up the big list, and
Yes.
that all of that seems to be fine, because if you don't get pregnant, we got the job done, it's fine. But no one really thinks about the future, and as you said, even getting into your 40s and the impact that's going to have.
Yes.
And then also a mind-blowing fact that I hadn't really thought about was, people always talk about, when people go through the menopause, they're a bit moody, but it's possibly obviously a combination of the hormones, but it's
Yes.
the not suppressing those emotions anymore, which is, I hadn't thought about that actually before either. So going back to your new project, which it sounds like a lot of things in your life have not been by accident, and almost like you're being called to the work, isn't it?
So true.
It's just like,
yeah.
And I know some of your work, I was looking at that, you believe in soul contracts.
I do.
Yeah. So do you think there is an element that you were called here to work specifically on those areas, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yes. I do. And I have observed how effortlessly the project has flowed. And the difference between allowing and just working with that flow has been extraordinary. And I've just been smiling as I see things just unfolding. And I in my 20s and 30s, I would have pushed to get the stuff done. I would have, rolled up my sleeves and, used my testosterone, that would come and peak as part of the month, but now I don't have that. So you're in a different phase. It's more of an allowing and much more of a surrender. And so it's been fascinating to watch how things have just happened without me trying, doing, pushing, or any of that. And I think also I knew I had to come to Ireland. Like I was teaching in Dublin and in Kinsale. I was a friend of mine asked if I would teach EFT in Kinsale, and I just loved. I loved the land. I loved the pace. I loved the people. I loved being by the sea because, of course, I'm from North Wales, so I was brought up by the sea. So I needed to be by the sea, and that's where I actually met my husband, so I had to come here. He was here and, he was running the film club and I love movies. So I said, I'm off. And that was it. And initially we were just friends, just kind of getting to know one another. And then the relationship developed. And then last year we got married. So it was sort of like he weathered the hormonal storms with me. God bless him, and then, proposed last year. So, thankfully we kind of got out of the woods with that one. So, I feel really, really blessed to be here. And, the people I have met have been extraordinary. And I just feel like I am in the right place, to write this book and to work with people here. And so, yeah, so I do feel that is divinely guided. I do feel like him and I have a contract because I just knew as soon as I saw him. And yet there was resistance within me because I was terrified of, being vulnerable again and, getting burned. And that hasn't happened. So, yeah, so I think there's a lot here that's really helping.
Yeah, so not only the work, but the place. And I do remember you telling me previously about, that time in your life and not sure if you'll meet someone and the fact that you met your husband in Ireland.
Yes.
And as you said, he weathered the storms and you're still together. So it must be love.
Him, oh my God, yeah, he has huge amounts of patience, and
Yeah.
that's part of it in the book, is
Yeah.
is really to explain from his perspective too, and I think that's what shifted in our relationship, in that the more he understood, I mean, he can't go through it because obviously he doesn't have the same body, but he's understanding what's going on. And part of it in the book is really about maybe sometimes what to say and what not to say, or what to do and what not to do, but also to clarify what's going on and that it isn't personal, and that this is, maybe lashing out because, you just feel like, I don't know what else to do. I mean, I've been unable to sleep and was sweltering, and I had my face against the tiles in the bathroom. I was so roasting and I was crying. I was like, if this is it, I just don't want to be here anymore. I really don't, because this is just shit, excuse my language. It was awful. Until I found that there were other things that you could take which would help the hot flushes,
So we hear about hot flushes as one of the main things for menopause, and I try to pretend this is not going to happen to me.
Okay.
I forget about what age I am. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe this is something I'm going to have to face. So for someone like myself who's going to be going through it at some point soon, or maybe soonish, be giving up my age now. This is not good. But what would be the key, I suppose, signs or challenges perhaps that you faced or that most women will face going through the menopause?
Well, so there are a few things there. Firstly, I was keeping a food diary and I realized that if I have sugar, that's a massive trigger because I've got too much sugar in my blood. So having sweet things, wine, anything sort of with sugar or alcohol and processed foods really triggered my hot flushes. That was one. Also, the hot flushes came and I started to notice that when I was really, really speaking the truth, like when I was really in alignment and I could feel the power of that truth, I'd get a hot flush. And I remember sitting with a client and he was talking about intimacy and, sexuality and what was happening for him. And right in the middle of it, I got a hot flush, and he was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm embarrassing you. I'll stop." And I was like, "No, no, 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 no. I can just feel the power of your truth, and I'm about to meet it with what I'm going to say right now." So he thought he was offending me, but I wasn't offended. It was like, "No, I can feel this is real. You're being real, and I'm going to just share now and be real." So that's also what I noticed when I was hit with some kind of stress, unexpected stress, I would get a hot flush. Also, if I suppressed my anger and I was trying to be the nice person, but actually I was really irritated about something and I pushed it down, I'd get a hot flush. I couldn't hide it anymore because my body just had this volcano moment, in front of everybody. So that's some of the things that I noticed. And then, of course, if I didn't watch my diet, I wouldn't be able to sleep because you'd have the hot flushes through the night. So then I would be freezing, 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 and then roasting, 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 having the window open, flicking off the covers, just saturated in sweat. So I learned that, having a towel on the bed and then going to bed on that towel, having loads of, change of clothing, and then stripping off, then taking the towel off, putting a new towel on, new nightie, off we go. And then I started to just not have anything on at all apart from the towel. And then I'd be putting that, to the one side and then starting again. But what I found, a colleague of mine who's a nutritionist, she said to me, "Try plant-based selenium." So I started to look for that. And I found a company who at that time was doing plant-based selenium. I took it for 3 days and the hot flushes were gone. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. I was like, "Oh my God, I'm going to sail through the menopause. This is amazing." And then the company changed because there was such a demand. They went from plant-based to synthetic. Didn't work anymore. Stopped working. So I was like, damn it, here we go again. And then there was a product called DIM, which was really good about flushing that bad estrogen out of your body. And that was really helpful for a while. And what I found recently was lion's mane. So that has been extraordinary. And particularly, see, when you go on holiday and you're in a hot climate and you're having hot flushes, it's horrendous. And you go to sleep and the room is 30 degrees and then you've got the aircon on and then you switch the air because you're frozen and then you're roasting. It's awful. So this time I went on holiday with a bottle of lion's mane. No hot flushes.
Wow.
No hot flushes at all. So there are certain things now. And as you know, no two women are the same. No one size fits all. And so it is about trial and error, talking to your GP. But what I'm noticing is a lot of women who are estrogen dominant, a lot of the stuff doesn't work for them because they've already got too much estrogen in their bodies. So it is about taking the bad estrogen out and then being able to build up. And then you can do that with food, different foods. There's an amazing woman, Dr. Mindy Peltz, and she talks about fasting and eating at different times in your cycle. And then she's also written books about the menopause. So she has a cookbook as well. So there's a lot more support where you can actually start eating foods that are going to help, high in fat. A colleague of mine, she's onto a carnivore diet, so she's only eating meat, high fat, and she's sailing through. She's absolutely sailing through. So there's lots of different ways, I think, but some women who have given birth, of course, their hormones have changed and there's a difference for them, but I didn't have children, so I was on the pill for at least 23 years, and I took it non-stop without a break for 23 years. That's a lot of chemicals in the body right there. And then you have other toxins in your system as well, which are also affecting your hormones as well. So the sprays, the perfumes, they change your hormones. So all of this stuff that you're doing in your 20s and thinking and 30s and thinking nothing of it, it will have an impact later on in your life. So the more you can eat clean now and take out the chemicals, whether that's with the body products, the beauty products, and in the water as well, that's going to make it easier. And the acupuncturist I had when I first came to Ireland, he said, your menopause should be the same transition as when you start bleeding. So it should be effortless, easy, and off you go. And then it should end the same way. But it's what we do in the middle. That's the impact, and that's what catches up with us later on.
So I'm wondering, if we think about the menopause in the fact that, the world we live in today has a lot of bad influences, toxins, and so on.
Yes,
But also coupled with women didn't really matter as such in terms of medical research because for many, many years it was men's bodies that were examined and researched. And also
correct.
we didn't live as long, so possibly they didn't see the outcome of a lady living in her 50s, 60s, hundreds of years ago.
Yes.
What is the progress happening now, or for you doing this research into the menopause? I
Mm.
mean, has there been any positive progress you've seen, and is it still very much for women are very much forgotten about what's the attitude you're seeing towards women and their bodies and looking at the changes towards the 40s and the 50s?
I think there is more of an openness. I think there is more of a willingness to discuss and share. I've certainly seen it with the women that I've spoken with. They're quite open to talking about it. I think there's still a little challenges with men who don't want to be seen dissing their wives or slating their wives or speaking badly about their wives. But part of their voices need to be in the book to share how they managed. Um, and I find that there is much more information available, particularly with the internet and with books now. There's a lot more than before. And I think also that there is more choice. So if, for example, you're not getting what you feel you need to get with a particular doctor, it might be worth changing, and there are menopause specialist doctors now, and a lot of them are women who have been through that journey, and so they've educated themselves. So in the States, for example, 1 hour of the training for a doctor is on the menopause. And yet, so many women are living longer than men and are going through the menopause. And so there's much more, I think, education happening for women, with women, by women, and actually including women in that conversation in terms of what's available and getting support for women. In Ireland, Loretta Dignam has done a huge amount of work to even get HRT available for women. So there's that, and I'm thinking also about my husband. There was a couple of years ago, there was the Menopause Day, which is the 18th of October. They had a speaker to come in to talk about menopause. So he went up and he wanted to put his name down, and the women were like, why do you want to come? What? This is for menopause? And he said, yeah, I have a wife or a partner at
Yeah.
home who's going through the menopause. I want to kind of learn a bit more about it and find out. Yeah, but this is, so they were totally aghast that he would be interested in putting his name down. And this is only a couple of years ago. As it happened, the shift changed and he wasn't able to go anyway. But it was just that kind of, this is women's stuff. And, what would you be wanting to know about that for, And so that's where I see the book as sort of bridging a gap and bringing in information for men and women, but more supportive of men, because I feel like there is a lot more out there for women now, and there is soon to be a movie coming out, and I've been talking with the producers of that movie. That I think it's called Wise Woman, the movie, in the US, and it's also talking about menopause and women and going through the change, and how our brains change, and you have that kind of ability to see so much more, and to be really tuned in and not worry about speaking your truth and speaking the truth. And so there are more things moving now than ever before. And of course, it's less taboo now because people are talking more about it, thankfully, Yeah.
When you were talking about your book,
Mm.
Michelle, and you were talking about the fact that you had to interview quite a number of men, including your husband. Like, what are the insights that came out of those conversations? Because when you're
Yeah.
talking about the menopause earlier, and again, I haven't gone through that yet, is it the
Yeah.
moodiness that the wives are feeling? Like, what is it that the men are struggling with, like on their end? Is it that their partners snap at them easily? Like, what is going on for the men?
Gosh. Well, I think if I look at my own journey, I didn't even know I was going through the menopause at 40. So, so a lot of women don't know they're starting the menopause. So the men are kind of like, well, what's going on with her and why is she so different? So it part of it, and on the I have a website that's starting about the book, menopausewingman.com, and there are questions on there. There's 6 questions. It's all anonymous, and there is a request for men to fill out those 6 questions and just share honestly. But what we've seen, so it goes straight to the publisher, and then we're starting to piece those into the book. What we've seen is that men just don't really know what's going on, and they feel so helpless and they feel so powerless. And of course, often the role of a man, and I know that's generalizing, but often men like to fix. They like to do something, and here is something that they can't do anything about. They can't fix it at all. So a lot of them have felt that they've been clueless, that they needed to educate themselves, that they should have read more about it, that perhaps they had more understanding. One person that I spoke with said, the quote about not waiting for the storm to be over, but learning to dance in the rain. And so it was sort of, and I think that's what happened in my relationship. It became stronger because I did feel like I had someone in my corner. It wasn't like, well, it's your stuff and you're dealing with it and off you go. He really wanted to be part of it, and became my wingman, and so when I couldn't sleep and I'd had a really, really bad night's sleep, I wasn't up for working in the morning. I was just really struggling. So he would take the dog for a walk in the morning, so to kind of give me, when he could, give me that breather. Or I would slip away in the afternoons and just kind of rest a little bit. So it's kind of that, and not being able to remember stuff and being mid-sentence and not being able to remember what you were saying, all of those things. It's like men were sort of, in a sense, clueless as to what else can we do here. I don't know what else to do, and so wanting to help, but just not knowing. And so, in the book, I talk about things that you can say, things that you can do, things that you cannot do, or should not do, maybe, or avoid doing. So just to kind of ease the situation. And so, making sure, for example, that there's water in the bedroom, make it just, even just those thoughtful things, about getting a fan close by, or, making sure there's perhaps face cloths in the freezer, in bags, and then just going and getting one so she can put it on her neck, put it on her face just to calm and cool down the system a little bit. Just little things like that. And it doesn't have to be a big conversation. It's just showing that you care and supporting the woman as she makes that transition. And as a result of that, the relationship gets stronger. Because if you're just saying, well, that's your thing, you deal with it, then you're feeling utterly isolated and like lost and alone. Your body's not doing what it should be doing, and the things that used to work now don't work at all. So having someone in your corner then really helps to strengthen your relationship. And so you come out of the other end of it, with much more of a cohesive relationship. And there's a strength there and there's a bond there where we're in this together. And so it's like starting a new chapter now, having, and I still get hot flushes, but it's not as prevalent. And I spoke to my mother and she said she still gets them. My mother-in-law is 88 and she still gets them. So they do come up, and it can be, whatever you're eating and your emotions too, or when you're not in alignment. But yeah, so that's what I saw, was a lot of men wanting to help, but not knowing what to do, feeling powerless, feeling helpless, feeling hopeless, not understanding what's going on for the woman either. And then seeing that this person is moody. Well, yes, if you're not sleeping, I'm not good when I haven't slept. I'm not the best, jolliest person. So, to find the things that help, and it's taken me a while to be able to get to that point where I can go back to sleep again. Because I would go to bed, it would take me ages and ages and ages to get to sleep, and I'd turn this way and that way, covers on, covers off, change the pillow, and then he would come in, lights on, da 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 da, and then he'd be fast asleep like that, and I'd still be struggling, and then I'd be having the hot flushes, and then I'd be sitting on the toilet and just thinking, I just don't know what else to do now, face on the tiles, and then go back to bed, and then I'd be sleeping for another couple of hours, and then another hot flush, and then we're all over again, change, off we go back to sleep again. And so you're not going to be at your best at all when that's happening, so it's like, okay, I'll collect the kids, or I'll do this, or I'll do this with the dog, or you take some time out, so it's that kind of thing that's really going to help the longevity of the relationship.
So your book is going to be a guide really for men to hopefully be more aware of women, and therefore creating that bond.
Yes.
It's sad because probably most relationships, rather than trying to fix it together, they fall apart.
They do.
And it sounds like your work is so important because it's that moment that's possibly the hardest part, if especially you'd been married for a long time and you'd been together for many years before that.
Yes.
And then you're going through that period of time. So what would you hope then, Michelle, for people to take away from your book, as I presume you're coming to the finishing?
Yes. Yeah, we're still looking for a few men's voices. So if there are men listening who their partners are going through it, or they have been through it, if they could go on to menopausewingman.com, that would be amazing, and just fill out those 6 questions. So now I've forgotten the blooming question. There it is, gone.
Example.
Yeah, live.
My question was, what do you hope that men and women will take away from this book?
Perhaps how to change and be in the relationship differently, to be together differently, because the relationship won't be the same, with the hormones changing. Our bodies are different and will change. And so it is about having a different connection and being in the relationship together, and a joint focus together, So a strengthening, I guess that's my hope, is a strengthening in the relationship rather than a separation in the relationship, or a decline of the relationship or a demise of the relationship, so that there's perhaps more communication, but much more support for men. I think that's also, yes, it's awful, and I'm not minimizing what's going on for women, but I also feel like men need to be that co-pilot, and they do need support, and they do need to be held in that environment and have the clarification of some of the things that they could try and suggestions. So it is an emotional handbook, but there's plenty of suggestions in the book to actually say, well, how about trying this and look at that? And I think the idea then is that the relationship grows, because you cannot stay the same and go through this life transition and this change by staying the same. The relationship won't last. So it's both parties need to change. Both parties need to step up and actually be ready to change, and start a new chapter together, both of you having been changed by this, and there's an evolution of the relationship and of each person having gone through that. It can't stay the same.
Mm.
Yeah.
What struck me as you were speaking there, Rochelle, and might be a silly question, but is there a male equivalent to menopause in the terms that
Yeah.
women go through this change?
Yeah.
They go through a change at a certain time in their life.
Yeah, I mean, there's no coincidence with that either. It's about the same time. There is a book written, I can't remember now the author, but it's called The Happiness U-Curve. And so it's sort of like men go for that, the position, the status, the job, that sort of career, and then it bottoms out. And then they're looking for something else that makes them happy, kind of like in the beginning with I'm doing this, but I want something more spiritual. It's that kind of thing that they're coming back up and looking for something much more spiritual. And that's happening at the same time as women are having the menopause. So they're also reevaluating their life, what's important. And what has happened in the past is, because the relationship hasn't worked, there's been a separation. The man's gone off, got the nice car, new model, and off we go again, you know what I mean? But it's being able to weather that and actually work with those spiritual values and looking at what does my heart say and what's really going to bring me happiness, not necessarily financially, because yes, that brings you happiness on some level, or freedom or security, but there's something else that we're all looking for, that gives us something more on a soul level about what really, really makes our heart sing. And so, it's that. So men are actually going through this happiness U-curve at the same time. So there's a reevaluation of both parties in the relationship, at the same time. So yeah, men go through it too, differently. I mean, they still have, every 15 minutes, they still have their boost of testosterone, while ours aren't going through that nice cycle anymore. It's like, you got estrogen going, then progesterone, then testosterone dropping, and it's like, but there's still, so they're not going through that hormonal shift unless they're going through something medically induced. So there are men who are going through cancer treatment and they're working with hormones, and they would also then start to get hot flushes, and they can sympathize then, so it isn't just we get to 50 and we get the menopause. It can be a medically induced menopause. So women in their 30s and 40s can also start with menopause and having the hot flushes and everything else, and that's horrendous. And my heart goes out to them, because at least I'd had kind of that made the choices, and I'd had lots of sort of different experiences. And so when it started at 50, it was like, even though there was a lot of grief around that too, that's it now, I've got no more eggs and that's the end of it. At least it's not happening in my 20s or 30s or 40s, which is really, really early, you know?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
devastating.
It is. It is. Very much so. Yeah. Yeah.
So, in terms of the menopause, it sounds for most people a very negative experience. I'm just listening. Oh
Yeah.
no.
Sorry.
But if we're to twist this around, and like, some of the things I heard today were about this connection with the divine feminine, with this element of understanding your truth.
Yeah.
That all sounds so wonderful.
Yeah.
If the couple are able to weather the storm and they survive and they stay together,
Yeah.
like what is that beautiful moment that the menopause can bring, not just a woman, but again, if she's in a relationship, what would you say, just in your own life, it has added to your life?
Yeah.
Or
It's a much deeper connection. It's a really, it's, it's, it is like you're meeting at such an intrinsic level, a soul level. There's such a bond there because it's not that kind of passion, and that's no longer there because the body has changed, but there's
yeah,
still that potency between you, and there's an honesty, there's a vulnerability, with having someone witness you go through these changes and your body changing too in very different ways. um I really feel like there's an expansion. There's an expansion of well, my intuition got so much stronger. The sessions I'm doing are so much more powerful now than ever before. You know, I can really feel the energy coming in. I can feel the truth. I can feel when people much strongly now, when they're in alignment and when they're not, but also when I'm channeling, excuse me, and it's coming through me. It's not me. Um, So there's a deepening of the relationship with ourselves, but also in partnership. There's a deepening. Um, I think there's much more being in the present moment, much more gratitude for having come through this journey and still being together. And then there's hope also that actually we're beginning a new chapter now, and unencumbered by all the other things, that we can actually start to make choices now that really bring us pleasure, that really make us happy. That it's not that we're deciding, on that treadmill and kind of, yeah, we got to get the house, we got to get the children, got to get this, which is all of the things society sort of sees us as being successful, but actually we can pivot and, pivot into something that really brings us joy. So I think it is liberating, in terms of being able to have that shift and that change, and to move into a deeper place in your relationship when you've weathered, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. There's it's such a transition,
right.
and it's difficult to say. I don't want people to take away that, oh my God, I have to be really fearful of this. There are lots of changes that are going to happen. Um, and yet it's potent, it's powerful, and it's freeing. It is freeing not to have the cycles anymore, not to have all that stuff going on. It's, oh my God, yeah, it's wonderful. you know
Freedom.
yeah, there is freedom. Yeah.
So finally, Michelle, there there's so much more I would love to ask you, and hopefully I can have you back
Be
again another.
lovely. I'd love that,
You're
Emma. Yeah.
you're such an amazing woman, and there's so many
Thank
other
you.
areas of your life I would love to find out about. But
Okay.
for today, it was such a focus. And where
Okay.
can people learn more about you and keep up to date with your work, and perhaps find out in the near future about your book launch that will be coming soon?
So the book has its own website. So that's menopausewingman.com. And that's where the questions are, just those 6 questions. So I have 2 sites. One is michellehardwick.com. And then my other business, which is, I was doing a lot of corporate work, doing meditations and mindfulness. So that's releasepeace.ie. So that's an Irish site. And that was really about releasing the stress and whatever was going on, and then finding the peace, finding the inner peace. So I decided that would be what I wanted. People were like, what does that mean? But it was more about, I just want to release the blockages or release the stress and the tension and actually find peace. So there's releasepeace.ie, michellehardwick.com, or menopausewingman.com. So yeah, I'd welcome
So
any
much to look
questions
at.
or any comments,
Yeah.
or I really would. But I just would like to say thank you for the work you're doing, and also for for giving me an opportunity to speak, Emma. I'm so grateful to you, and talk about the project as well. I'm really, really thankful to you too. Yeah, for your time.
And as you said, as you shown in your story today, Michelle, all the serendipitous moments in your life. I got in touch with you through a sort of a mutual friend
Uh-huh.
had mentioned you and said how wonderful you were, and
Wow.
he'd met you many years ago, I think, in Beijing.
Correct.
And
Yeah,
it is about noticing those signs, isn't it? As you
it
go
is.
through life,
It is.
listening to your authentic self, and then when people give you little signals, follow them. And that's really what I did, getting in touch with you,
Yes.
because
Ah,
this person had recommended that you would have a wealth of experience and
wow.
that you were living in Ireland. So I'm really
Uh,
looking forward to getting to Cork to see you in
That'd be
person at some.
great. Yeah. Yeah, that'd be lovely. I think, when
Yeah.
I first started with the spiritual work, people would say,
Mm.
well, yeah, I saw the 3rd sign and then, I went for it. And I was like, well, do you have to get the universe to give you 3 signs before you actually take the notice, take notice? How about just on the first one that you just go, oh yeah, there it is? And it was
Yeah.
interesting. I asked my sister about that because I was kind of in 2 minds many years ago. I was in 2 minds about doing something. And I said to her, I'm really not sure. She said, well, then, she said, if it's an instant yes and it flies in, do it. But anything else is a no. And
Mm.
that was just so powerful. It was like, does it feel, yes, it is, off I go, so I don't have to ruminate in my mind anymore. It just feels right. And everything else is a no. So I'm thrilled that I'm grateful for the connection, and that's wonderful, that here we are today through that, it's marvelous,
No, it's amazing. And yeah, I'm going to keep looking out for those signs,
Do.
Michelle.
Do.
And, thank you again for joining me
Very welcome.
this
Thank you.
afternoon. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.
And I hope you have a lovely evening.
Thank you so much. And hello to all of your listeners as well. And thank them for making it through to this far. And I look forward to chatting with you again soon.
2 chatty women together, we can't stop us. Anyway, thank you very much, Michelle.